we will look at the process of how district lines are being drawn by the state legislatures. And you should note that every 10 years a census is conducted, and a census is a count of the people, and the federal government is supposed to do an official count of the people to determine each state's population. Now, why is counting the population important? Well, for these notes, it's important because it will help determine how many congressmen in the House of Reps each state will receive. Because if you recall, membership in the House of Reps for a state is based on a state's population. So every 10 years, they conduct a census. Then the Census Bureau will tell the state legislatures, this is how many seats you receive in the House of Reps. So a law was passed in 1929 called the Reapportionment Act, the Reapportionment Act of 1929. Well, before 1929, every 10 years, they decided to keep adding more and more members in the House of Reps. They decided to go ahead and keep adding more members to the House of Reps. Well, in 1929, they decided, let's just go ahead and stop increasing the size of the House of Reps and let's keep it at a certain number. And they decided that that number should be set at 435. So this law that was enacted in 1929, called the Reapportionment Act of 1929, set the number of members in the House of Reps at 435. Now, why is this a significant law? Because from that time forward, when the Census Bureau conducts a census and then determines how many seats a state receives in the House of Reps, well, some states are going to gain seats, and of course, if some states are gaining seats, that means other states are going to have to lose seats, and that's why that is significant. If you look at California, California in 1980 was given 47 districts. 1990, it went up to 52. In 2000, it went up to 53. 2010, it went to 53. And if I was to predict, California is going to either stay at 53, that's my prediction, or might even lose a seat and drop to 52. So if California had been gaining seats during most of these decades, that means other states must be losing seats. Now, which states have been gaining seats over time and which states have been losing seats? Well, if you look at what we call the Sun Belt states, states where it's sunny, California, Texas, Florida, these states have been seeing an increasing number of seats in the House of Reps because their population has increased. So which states have been losing seats? Seats which I would call, or states I would call, the Rust Belt states. Rust Belt states. Why are they the Rust Belt states? Because those are states that relied heavily on manufacturing, and when a lot of these jobs were lost, a lot of people left the state because no jobs were available. We call those the Rust Belt states. That would be states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan. So they've lost seats over time, while the Sun Belt states have gained seats. All right, so what is the role of the Census Bureau? Well, as I stated previously, the Census Bureau does a count of the people every 10 years. Once they do that count, then they will use a formula to determine how many seats a state will receive in the House of Reps, which is called reapportionment. Once they calculate those numbers, they will then send the number to the state legislatures, who then have the responsibility to carve up the district lines, a process called redistricting. Once the state legislatures carve up the district lines, they then will pass their mapping of the district lines, the redistricting process, over to the governor, who then can sign it into law. Well, as you can note, most states, when they draw up district lines, their state legislatures are going to try to draw district lines that will favor the majority party. So if you look at California, the majority party in California is the Democrats. So if they were given the power to draw district lines, they would try to draw up district lines to favor the Democrats so they would win the most seats. Now, beginning in 2010, a new process was used in California, and they decided to go ahead and create a process in which the state legislatures no longer are directly involved in drawing up district lines, because many people decided that we need to take that power away from the state legislatures so they no longer can gerrymander the districts. Remember gerrymandering, carving up district lines to favor the dominant political party. So in 2008, a proposition was passed. Excuse me, it was an initiative that decided to create an independent commission. Now, this independent commission would only be used to draw state legislative districts. So, no longer would the state legislature draw up their own state legislative district lines. Now, this independent commission will be given the responsibility to draw up the district lines. Well, 2 years later, many people thought, well, if this independent commission can draw up state legislative districts, then they should also draw up congressional districts. So to recap, Proposition 11 allowed the independent commission to draw up state legislative districts for the state assembly, that's 80 seats, and state legislative districts for the state senate, which is 40 district seats. Now, Proposition 20 says, all right, now once California knows how many members in the House of Reps they're going to receive, then we're going to let this independent commission draw up the congressional districts for the state of California instead of the state legislature drawing up those district lines. What has this process done? This process has eliminated gerrymandering being done by the state legislature. Now, as long as the independent commission is completely independent from the state legislature and political parties, this is a very successful outcome that will take place. Note, however, that the independent commissions, when they draw up the district lines, one thing that they are not allowed to see is they're not allowed to look at registration of members on a map when they draw up the district lines. That was primarily what the state legislatures looked at when they drew up district lines. Now, for the independent commission, they're not supposed to draw up district lines based on party affiliation. It's supposed to be based on common community features, and they have a certain requirement that they have to abide by when they draw out the district lines. And they also have to have an open hearing process where they just explain why they drew up the district lines that they did and how they did it. So it's a much more open and transparent process today than it was when the state legislature drew up the district lines. All right, so if you go on to the next slides, you will see how the independent commission has drawn up district lines that are that do not have gerrymandering that's going to be used like it used to be when state legislatures drew up the district lines. Looking at this map, you will see that the 42nd congressional district, which was the district from 2000-2010, this was a district that was drawn by the state legislature of California. And if you look at this district carefully, you'll notice that it's predominantly an affluent area where mostly Republicans are going to reside. Now, the district that encompasses most of that area is now called the 39th district, which was drawn after 2010 by an independent commission. As you can see, it's a much more compact district. Now, you don't necessarily have a district that's drawn based solely on affluence and party membership. It's more based on a district that is more compact and more circular. Now go on to the other slides to see other examples of a comparison between state legislative districts being drawn, of a comparison between a state legislature drawing of a district versus an independent commission. Looking at this map, you will notice I have a map of Iowa, which looks like four quadrants that were drawn. And then I also have a map of Ohio. Now, Iowa, in this case, was drawn by an independent commission, and therefore you could argue that those districts, they are basically drawn basically in an even pattern. I mean, you could argue whether or not that they are completely even. If you're wondering why one district might be bigger than others, it's probably a more rural area. But if you look at Ohio, look at those districts. Look at the district that's yellow. Look at the district that's red. You'll notice there are like little slivers. Well, obviously, when you look at those districts were gerrymandered to basically favor a political party. I would argue in this case they were gerrymandered to help out certain congressmen from a political party win those districts. So those districts clearly were gerrymandered districts, and it's clear that the way those district lines are drawn were meant to favor a political party. So the reason why I wanted you to see these two maps is to see the difference between when independent commissions draw up district lines versus a state legislature drawing up district lines. The biggest difference here is state legislatures, they're worried about trying to draw up district lines to favor their political party so they'll win as many districts as possible. Independent commissions, the biggest, I would say, advantage for Americans is the fact that they don't actually look at a map of party affiliation when they draw up district lines. They're supposed to look at common features of the community when they draw up the district lines, and they're supposed to use a more open and transparent process.